Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Patreon podcast. This week, I wanted to talk a little bit more seriously about learning how to defend your creative work and your property. So this stemmed from something that happened in, I think, early February, where a website decided to skim all of Spotify and turn essentially the album art and a link to the Spotify song into NFTs. If you're not familiar with what those are, that is a very long conversation, but essentially it's the short version, at least in my opinion, is it's a scam to sell cryptocurrency. I'll put a link to a very informative video in the description. But the whole point is this happened to a lot of people, a lot of small artists and a lot of big artists. And initially, when I read the news on that and I discovered my music was part of this whole scam, I was a little upset. But then I thought about what was going on and how this is going to play out. And I knew that this wasn't going to bear any fruit for them. Partially because they had also skimmed and were trying to sell NFTs of something like Disney and Sony and like these really big studios. And now that this news was a bit more mainstream, those studios would get involved and shut this down pretty quickly, which is what they did. By the end of the day, that site was down. It's back up again in some other form, but it's definitely not infringing on copyrights like it is now, or it was then. And I think that having a level of knowledge on your work is so valuable because it lets you know like when you should get involved and when you should send takedown requests to service providers. I sent their website was hosted on Amazon through AWS, so I, as well as many other people, sent a takedown request, which is probably one of the reasons why it got taken down so quickly. And like understanding your recourse and understanding how to analyze these emergent issues. I don't want to say threats because they're not usually threats, but like when these issues pop up, like how do you deal with them? Like how do you deal if somebody is using your music without your permission? And this is a very case-by-case basis. It depends on how you want to distribute your art and how you want other people to experience and possibly use it themselves. So in my case, a lot of my music is licensed to be used with attribution, which basically means that if you want to put it in a YouTube video, as long as my name is in the description or in the video itself, that's fine. I don't care. But when people use my music in ways that I don't approve of, that's when I have to figure out like how do I want to respond to this. If it's a small thing, like if somebody's using my music in an itch.io game and they're releasing it for free and they're not using my name anywhere in it, it's just like, is it really worth like raising a stink over that? Probably not. But conversely, and this actually just happened to a friend of mine on Twitter, where he wrote a song collaboratively with a large YouTuber, and that YouTuber isn't compensating him for the streaming revenues for that through YouTube ads money. And it's just like, there's no comfortable way to get around that. Like, you are owed a part of that. I don't know if he had a contract or anything. And contractually, like if you had a contract, it would make this process a lot easier to manage. But but he was issuing like takedown requests the other day. And it's like, I mean, good for him. Like, he's protecting his intellectual property. Like, he worked very hard for that song, to make that song, and the person made the YouTube video. I'm sure he worked really hard to make the video, but everybody's got to get compensated, and protecting your work like that is important. So I think that it's just kind of getting the knowledge for that. And unfortunately, like, I don't feel like I'm an expert in that regard. I feel like I know enough to protect myself, but mostly it's finding your comfort level and like how like how far are you willing to go for like just letting people use your work, either with attribution or without, or if you want people to pay you, or like in my case, like if generally what happens is you can use with attribution, that's fine. If you are doing something that makes you money, whether through ads, like if you use my music in a YouTube video and you have ads on that video, or if you are using my music in a game and you're selling that game, you're not just giving it away for free as like a test thing. Like I request that they either buy the album or subscribe to my Patreon. Like they have to pay me in some way to use that music. And I think that that's very fair. But like those are my limits. That's what I chose when it came to distributing my music. And that really depends on you. That depends on how you want to approach it. So I think kind of taking a minute to figure out what you're comfortable with and then making that knowledge known, whether that's on your Bandcamp page or your DeviantArt page or whatever, like making it very cut and dry, like what's okay, what's not okay, how they can get in touch with you if they have questions. Like all of this is very important. I have a section on my website specifically for that, specifically for licensing. And that's very, very important for me. And then really it's just kind of understanding how to protect yourself when something like this comes up. Like I mentioned NFTs at the start of this. I have been keeping an eye on NFTs for probably 3 months now. Again, like I said, it's basically a large scam that is, I think, finally coming to a head because more and more press is getting like focused on it, and people are kind of understanding that it's essentially a very, very internet-wide pump and dump where they're just trying to get as many people invested in this cryptocurrency as possible, and then the people in charge are just gonna dump it and leave everybody else holding the debt. So don't invest in crypto. But like when I saw that this was happening, I was not specifically with this thing with a website that created my music as NFTs. When I saw that this was happening, it didn't bother me. Like I saw some people in the responses like completely losing their minds, justifiably so, if they're not familiar with what NFTs are. But like listening to their responses, you could tell that they're not familiar with what was happening. And I think that it's really valuable to understand that in this case, what they were stealing is your album art, not the rights to your album art, but just a picture of it and a link to your Spotify. And like, who cares? I'm not saying that that's like okay for them to do. It was definitely not okay for them to do. It was still like identity, like artistic identity theft, basically. But I don't want to get into the whole NFT thing. If people want me to talk about NFTs, I can. Just let me know. But I don't want to get into it because like it's so intentionally confusing that you get like 3 or 4 sentences into a conversation about NFTs and you have to start every sentence with, now this sounds really stupid, but just because it is a scheme that is intentionally very, very confusing. Again, I'll leave a video describing NFTs in the Patreon comments section. And like it's a very comprehensive video, and it's about as fast as it can be when it comes to describing this stuff. And it is 2.5 hours long. So it is intentionally, the whole scheme for NFTs is intentionally very confusing. So anyway, that's really what I wanted to talk about though, is to have an understanding of how you want your art to be distributed, how you want it to be experienced, and like if other people want to use it, like how do you approach that problem and how do you communicate that? And I think that being direct is by far the best way to do it. because it's so easy to just be like, oh, you can just do what you want, it's fine. But then eventually somebody will do something that you don't want, and then you don't really have any easy way to kind of delineate between what you want and what you don't want. So it's good to just get it out there and just get it all on paper or on a website, and just kind of have it there. Anyway, I kind of lost steam on this one, but you know what I mean. If you have questions about this, please feel free to leave a comment or reach out to me in some way, because I'm more than happy to talk about this. It's a very confusing and a very scary topic, but I think it's ultimately incredibly important to protect your work. So do that. Go do it. So thank you again so much for listening, and thank you again for being a Patreon subscriber. It really means a lot to me. Whether you're here because you support my work or you're here because you are a creative person yourself and you are using my music in your projects, either way, I'm very, very grateful, and I'm glad that you're here. So thank you again. I hope you have a wonderful Friday and a fantastic weekend, and I'll talk to you later. Be remarkable.